Hello, this is Russell Almand from the Choristers Guild, and welcome to the Open Fifth podcast, where we discuss musical notes from churches, schools, the community, and everything from C to G. Well, today we are going to dive into a little bit more of the church world and see how to navigate the different aspects of either performing or directing within a church setting. Now, you might be a full-time church director or worship leader or something like that, or you might have it as a part-time that you do on weekends, or maybe you're involved in singing in a choir, singing on a praise team, or playing in an orchestra. Well, we're going to talk about a few different ways that we have to navigate within the church world and just some things to be aware of. And maybe you're thinking, well, I'm not really involved in any type of church music work. But next week, we are actually going to have Victor Johnson in our next episode as he talks about navigating the school world of music. So if you're interested in that, make sure that you check out that episode as well. But today we're going to dive into the church music world. Now, this has a kind of personal connection for me because most of my music work is done within the church, and I've grown up doing music all throughout since I was in elementary school, playing little piano solos at church and things like that. So I love talking about the music world in the church setting. But this also has a connection with Choristers Guild because as a nonprofit, we are very driven by our mission statement. And in our mission statement, you can see we're enabling leaders to nurture the musical and spiritual growth from children, youth, and adults. So within the church setting is a very big deal for the Choristers Guild and for including our mission in the things that we do. Now, a lot of that is done in either children's choirs or adult choirs or handbells, but we're going to talk about an array of different areas within the church that we need to be aware of as we're working in it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is actually leadership structure. Now, if you've been in a church music setting, you know that there are lots of different avenues that you have to go through to do what you're wanting to do in the music setting. So, for example, in different churches, there is going to be different leadership structures, not just within the music department, but in the church as a whole. So you might have one church where the music director is given full reign, just say, okay, do what you do best, and just put it together and give me the order of service on Sunday. Or you might have another one where the entire leadership team wants to know what's going on in the music, what are we doing, I want specific songs done for this specific Sunday, Some might follow the liturgical calendar and be really passionate about that, and others might be more free and just let you do whatever you feel is best for that Sunday. So it's important to know at first, when you're first getting started with a church, it's important to know what the leadership structure is. Who are you answering to, especially if you're a part-timer and you're coming in on Sundays and maybe once during the week to prepare. You need to know who you're answering to and who is helping guide what you're trying to do with the music there. And communication is the key point of this. With pastors and leaders, it's important to talk with them, know where they're going, ask them for feedback, different things, just so that you are connected. That way, many times in churches, there are people really want to worship God well. And a lot of people have an idea of what that looks like for them. And it might differ from what you are doing. And they're going to be passionate about that. And that's good. But they might have disagreements. And it is very, very helpful and very important for you to be in connection with your leadership of the entire church. That way, if there is a disagreement, then you know that you are trying to do the mission of that leadership team. And the more that you can connect with them and communicate with them what you're doing and why you are doing it, the better those situations are going to go. So I mentioned leadership first because it's very important within church settings, and they are all different. So communication is key. be- because you never quite know, depending on which church you're in, which way, how important it is going to be to the rest of the leadership. So that's how we start. But there's another thing that is unique to churches and also is very different. You might be seeing a theme here. Some churches are completely volunteer musicians only. All of the musicians, other than maybe the leaders or maybe one or two leaders, are going to be volunteers. And it's going to be important to maximize their time and their talents, which I talked about in episode 3, if you want to go back and look at that. So I won't hark on that too much here, but being volunteers, it's important to know what you have, know what skills you have, and not try to do too much if you don't have the skill level to do it, because you want to do things well. And maybe that is not at as high of skill level as you would like to do. And that's okay. That the church work is going to be a little bit different. In my experience, a lot of times I can get in full-on performance mode, and I want it to be absolutely perfect. But in that setting, a lot of churches, they don't as much care about perfection, but they just want it to be out of a heartfelt worship. So the church setting is definitely a different setting than a performance in many different ways. But another thing that you might have to deal with is different styles. So churches are going to, again, very different. So that's why I always start with communication is key. You want to know what you're getting into and what the leadership wants you to do and how flexible you can be. Because music style is very important in the church world. Maybe it's more traditional, maybe it's more contemporary, maybe you have 2 services and you're leading both. You have to know how to navigate that, and the way you do that is by communication and knowing exactly what the church has done, where do they want you to take it. Sometimes you get brought into a situation and they actually want you to progress them further or dial them back. I've been in churches where they've been doing both. One church was going to integrate some more contemporary style things, while another one had gone more contemporary and kind of wanted to scale back and do some extra traditional stuff. So you never quite know which way they want to go, but that's why communication is key. So you have to understand that leadership structure is going to be different in each church. Music style is going to be different in each church. And whether you use volunteer or paid performers is going to be different. So it's always different. So if you work in multiple churches, you know this. You can tell by just how things function. Some are organized, some are not, some are more contemporary, some are more traditional. It's just important to understand where the church as a whole wants to go. And that is, I think, one of the hardest things as a part-time musician that I come into, where I've guest led at different churches or it's just important to understand where they're going and fitting into that role nicely. I also am a theology student, so I'm also involved in that side of the church world. And I know that from my experience there, even in guest speaking at churches, I have to be aware of where that church is. Theologically, style, dress, everything is. And so that's why it's really important just to make sure that you're aware when it comes to doing the music style. Now, another thing that we kind of touched on a little bit is the traditional and contemporary, you could say divide. I don't like saying divide, but they are different. And we'll probably have an episode later where we touch a little bit more on this, but I just want to bring it up now because some churches are running into, hey, I've done traditional my whole life, but we want to be more blended. That's a really trendy term, having a blended service where you have some traditional and some contemporary. Well, it's important to really talk through that with your leadership, get feedback often, and because it's a hard thing to navigate and it's hard to do well. But we're going to talk about that in another episode probably, because that is way too big of a topic to dive in right now. But what I really want y'all to think about today is just communication within church work, because one, our roles can look totally different within each church, whether that's as a part-time performer, full-time, but either or, we need to be talking to the leadership teams. We need to get feedback. We need to communicate what we are doing and why we are doing it, making sure it lines up with what they are doing as well. So that is the key, that if you are listening today, just think communication. You want to know where the church is going and where you can fit into what they're trying to do with their mission. So if you have any comments or questions about this topic or about something else, please leave a comment below. And maybe you have an idea on something that we might want to talk about in the future. Maybe something I said just stirred up a question that you had, and I would love to hear about it so we can talk about those things in the future. In the next episode, remember, we're going to have Victor Johnson. So episode 5 is going to be Victor coming in and talking about the school world and how to navigate things in there, which he is an expert at. So make sure that you subscribe and notify so that you hear about all of our new episodes and new content that we will bring along. And thank you for joining us on the Open Fifth podcast.